And a lot of, I think 87% of them said they spent over $50 a day on treatment that could return their function to more than 70% of its usual. So I think there's an appetite for payment if the government shirks its responsibility to care for people.
Okay, thanks for raising all of that and for outlining your work. We have to move on. We've got a nice segue next. We have got Dr. Annie Hill, who's a researcher doing work in speech therapy services. So thank you both, Chris and Stephen, for your contributions today.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, and just on that, I think that patient in Japan, is this not on? No. I will get you a new battery and we'll be fine. Don't have to twist it or anything. Oh, hang on. So anyway, that patient in Japan, I think, also came through our clinic as well. So he was able to access services from lots of different sites, which is great, and obviously really helped him. That's not it though. No, but it is in this. Oh, it's in that one. Yeah. I might need to wait for this because I know I don't have a very loud voice, and I will wear it out. So I'm going to be a good speech pathologist and not shout. Okay, I'll shout. It's all right.
No, I just unscrewed the wrong section of the microphone.
All right, well, I'm Annie Hill, and I have two jobs. One is with the Centre for Research in Telerehabilitation, which Trevor was talking about earlier. And my other role is with the Centre for Research Excellence in Aphasia Recovery and Rehabilitation.
Hello. Not these ones either.
Not those ones either.
Can you shout?
I will.
And I'll be back with new batteries.
Okay.
New batteries.
All right, so today I just am going to very briefly talk about a little bit of the work that we've done through the Centre for Research in Telerehabilitation. So we've been doing this work for about 17 years, might be closer to 18 now, and we've been doing it across communication and swallowing. And that has included both assessment and therapy, and it's been the whole range. So from one-on-one therapy to group therapy using multimodal video conferencing, to personalised therapy that people can do in their own time and have that data coming back through to us. I'm not actually going to talk about all of that because there's quite a lot of work there, but that link there will... It sounds like it's working.
Did you hear it?
Take it to the new.
I'm not sure who that person was that left it on overnight, but
Thank you very much. That's much better. But that link there will take you to our telerehabilitation research and engagement theme site, which will then link you to all of the work that we've done. But one of the big things that has come out of the work that we've done over that time has been the UQ Telerehabilitation Clinic. Now, this is a clinic that was brought about by a generous donation, and we were able to open it in June of 2015. This is a clinic in which we train every single student that comes through in how to do telerehabilitation. So they get hands-on training. So that's all of our physios, our OTs, our speech pathologists. Research is also being embedded within that. So we're able to show that the training that we do actually improves their knowledge and then their skill, and then they're able to take that out into the into their jobs. This clinic actually provides services. So the man in Japan was able to access services through this. So people out in the general public can get in touch and actually see if there are services that perhaps suit their needs. Right, so that's one thing that I was going to talk through. The next thing is the Centre for Research Excellence in Aphasia, Rehabilitation and Recovery. So this is NHMRC funding, which is all about capacity building. It's led by Professor Miranda Rose, but it is across a whole heap of unis. So it's nationwide. The idea with this is that we're trying to mainstream aphasia services. So we're trying to embed aphasia services into all stroke services. Because often people with aphasia, and perhaps I should just explain what aphasia is, although I suspect that most people here know. Yes, say it. So aphasia is the language disorder that often happens post-stroke. It can affect reading, writing, gesture, speaking, understanding. It can affect all of them or some of them to varying degrees. So it changes somebody's ability to communicate in a really profound way. So we want to try to embed aphasia services into mainstream services for stroke. So the team come from all of those different areas, and we'll be doing work across a variety of areas, which I'll show you now. We have four main areas of research. So the first one is looking at the neurobiological and psychosocial predictors. The second one is to look at treatment effectiveness. The third one, which is the one that I'll be talking through, looks at the role of tech for healthcare communication and rehabilitation. And the fourth one looks at mental health and well-being. To support that, we have a research platform which looks at knowledge translation. It looks at a standardised approach to the economic evaluation, technology-enabled aphasia research, and aphasia research hub. So we know that technology is not being really used to the best advantage. So within stream 3, which is the tech stream and is led by Professor Leanne Torr, we are going to be doing a number of different studies. The first one is called Lift Home. So this is where we want to deliver an intensive, comprehensive aphasia therapy straight into the home. So that will involve one-on-one therapy, group therapy, computer-based. It will involve talking to families, and there'll be a challenge task. So we've been doing this, and we've been doing this in an in-person sort of setting. We're going to translate that all into tele. To support that, we're going to validate some of the tests that we use. So earlier today, Trev had been talking about how that's done, and I won't go into all of that now, but that's a piece of work that will start very soon. We have a study where we're building an aphasia app. Now, this is not an app to deliver therapy, but it's an app to support communication between the person with aphasia and their family and the people in the stroke unit. We'll be furthering some work in e-health communication partner training, and we're also looking at the automated marking of interactions, which would be between people with aphasia and health professionals. So this is our CRE website, so feel free to go there and to look through it all. You can also join our community of practice, which would be great, and in doing that you'll find out about all of the work that we plan to do. So this is our very first year, so we have another 4 years of funding. So this is all just about to move on. And these are our social media handles, so feel free to have a look at those as well. The final thing that I'd like to talk through is another piece of really exciting news. This is the Queensland Aphasia Rehabilitation Centre. Again, we have the Bowness family who are again giving money, and that has been matched by the university, which has allowed us to build this centre. And this is in partnership with the Metro North service. So this is going to be the first service which is dedicated to people with aphasia, and this will be a wonderful site in which we'll be able to run studies, and so it'll be a real test bed. If you would like to find out more, or if you'd like to join that, then you'll see that there's a phone number there or an address where you're able to get in touch. And hopefully I have kept to time.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
Terrific. We are running a wee bit behind time, but I know Annie and Trevor have to run. So is there a quick question or comment for Annie before they leave? No? Well, thank you both for coming and joining us from Queensland and sharing all your wonderful work in this space. And thank you for also providing lots of links to websites to enable people to get other information about the various aspects of the work presented. So, all right, our next speaker is Margie Galloway, who's going to talk about the EXTO study.
Thank you very much. My name is Margie Galloway. I've just recently completed a research study whereby we used telehealth to deliver an exercise program to people after they've had a stroke. And I'm going to present some of the findings from that study, and also one of our participants from that study is also going to just explain his participation and what he got out of being part of this program. Oops. Thank you. What we know about people that have had a stroke is, unfortunately, after stroke, we know that physical activity levels and cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory fitness levels are very low. And unfortunately, the combination of low fitness and low physical activity leaves people at a greater risk of having a second stroke or a further stroke. As you can see from this graph here, an average 50-year-old person up here on the left would have a fitness level there, and your average stroke survivor, unfortunately, is usually around 50% of that. And so what we wanted to do in our particular study is find better ways of increasing people's cardiorespiratory fitness. We know there's many reasons why people after they've had a stroke don't do much fitness work, don't do much physical activity. They find it difficult to get to places where physical activity opportunities exist. They might have been left with significant physical impairments and just lack of motivation and other sorts of psychosocial reasons why physical activity and exercise levels are low. We do know that if we can supervised fitness, we have a much better adherence rate. People are more likely to attend sessions if we can provide supervision. And as part of our study, we looked at ways that we could do that and how we could provide supervision. And we came across telehealth and decided that that was probably a reasonable way to go. So the aim of our program was to deliver an at-home fitness program 3 times a week. The session duration was between 10 and 25 minutes, and our program lasted for 8 weeks. And our measures on that for that program were how feasible it was to deliver the intervention or deliver the exercise program via telehealth, and also how satisfied people were, how satisfied participants were with participating in that particular program. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ray here. Ray was one of our participants, and he's going to provide a little bit of information about how he went in the program. Thank you, Ray.
Sorry, I can't seem to hold the microphone at the same time as doing this, so just deal with my voice. It's a little quieter than it could be.
If Margie can hold it for you, that would be better, if that's okay.
So that, so how I found out about this, study is, I've had the honor of actually being on the volunteer register for a few years now, and I've done a few studies, and at the end of one of them, the researcher actually mentioned to me that this might actually be coming up. And then the volunteer register actually called me up and said, do you want to consider considered for this? I thought, well, it sounds good. I thought that at least it would actually give me some other physio assessment sessions, which I thought would be a really good thing. I thought it would actually extend the exercise that I got at the time. I actually had my own private physio at the time, but I knew that I needed to get more than just that. I was looking for something that's a little bit more convenient than having to come into town sometimes. And I just wanted to give back. I mean, all this this community, which you have in here, the actual practitioners and the doctors really gave me a lot in my recovery and to where I am at the moment. So from this, I was looking for those additional sessions that I wanted. I wanted to see what my fitness levels were at the time, but also to see them increase, obviously. All right. Because I'm one of those guys that even back in my working life needed a variety of things. I was looking for a variety of exercises, otherwise it wasn't getting done. And I also was looking for someone to actually help me with the cardio part of my exercises. My other physio was looking at the other parts of my my rehabilitation, but not on the cardio part of it, and I didn't want to take him away from what he was already doing. I wanted to make sure, like I said, that it was more convenient. It had to be interesting. If it wasn't interesting, I wasn't interested. Fortunately, Margie did a pretty good job of that. Now I just we have to. Is it on? Oh, okay. Yeah. So actually, before I could start, I had to have something set up. Research had to come back and check my house out and make sure that it was appropriate. I had some room for actually doing the exercises. That's one thing we have to remember on all of these things, that whatever the person on the other side of the telerehab is doing, we have to make sure that at the home situation, you've got what it is that you need. We also had to make sure I had all the items I needed, and I had to go to the uni for baseline test to check my fitness levels and some of the exercises there, which we also did halfway through those 8 weeks and after too. Just for some reason we might wanted to see how I was doing afterwards. I also had to figure out how to use the sensors that were given to me. It's for like pulse, and I also had some sensors that were used to monitor my walking between some sessions as well. We had to set up the tablet, and in my case, the backup computer, and we had to make sure that the Rehab software was running. And I had to make sure that I had someone with me that could do the amount of supervision that was needed in the actual sessions themselves. So in the actual sessions, the physio was in their office or in the clinic, and like I said, I had to have someone with me, so we had to make sure that that person actually also knew what they were doing. We had to make sure there was some sort of instruction as to what it was they were supposed to do, and what not to do, I guess. So these were the 10-minute sessions that I had, and that was done 3 times a week. We recorded my pulse before, during, and after each session, and as I said, the measuring of my walking was also done. That was done offline and sent in to the researcher after those. Okay, so from this, I got all the actual additional physio I was looking for. Good. I had actually had a lot of fun doing it over the internet at home. There's nothing like actually using some of the things around your own home to do some of these exercises, and the fact that you're doing something small, doing it over the internet itself. I did find out what my fitness levels were, but sadly I didn't see the gains I thought I was looking for, but I was only in the 10-minute state, and that I had been a fairly active athlete before all this. I should have realized that it was going to take a little bit more time than that. I did get some more pro coaching, so it wasn't just here's what you should do. It was actually done by someone who knows what they're talking about, and was able to tell me what I was going to do in the future. I also found that it was actually more convenient than coming into town. That was for things like parking and getting someone to drive me in and stuff like that. And I got to learn some interesting stuff about the telerehab as it was. I'll just give it back to Mario.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And as Ray said, his particular case, he might not have got the fitness gains he was after, but I might just add that Ray was probably our fittest participant to start with, and he was put into the exercise group that was doing the least amount of training. So we had some better results. We got some good results from Ray, but certainly the fitness gains that we saw in the other groups were probably a little bit higher. Look, as far as the overall study went, we ended up recruiting 21 people into our study, and I'm really pleased to see there's a number of people here today that were part of that study, and I hope they got something out of it, because we certainly did. We ran 476 sessions, and our participants attended 94% of those, which was just fantastic, and 85% of those were delivered successfully via telehealth, so that was another great achievement. Nobody withdrew from the study due to any of the telehealth reasons. A couple of people were ineligible to be part of our trial because we insisted that there was somebody at home with them while they exercised, and not everybody who we know who ends up at home after they've had a stroke have anybody with them. So unfortunately for this particular trial, they weren't eligible. Mostly our sessions were safe. We unfortunately did have one person have one fall, but they weren't badly injured, luckily, and continued on at the next session. As far as reliability goes, as I said, we delivered over 85% of our sessions via telehealth. And so they were done via video conferencing, and sometimes we had to resort to a phone if our internet dropped out or became unstable, like we just saw a few moments ago. Most of the participants reported that the telehealth experience was acceptable. They could see me clearly enough. I found that people that had NBN, we had a much greater and much better experience. People that still had ADSL, we had pretty fuzzy views of people, which I found a little bit difficult to get people's, to see people's faces clearly enough. But we got by. Participants reported that the systems that we implemented were easy to learn, easy to use, and that they could use them by themselves, which was fantastic. And that they would recommend highly that they would do this program again if it was available, and would recommend it to other people that have had a stroke. What we did find, which was fantastic, and Coralie mentioned it before in the earlier session, was that age or people's prior level of technical familiarity did not affect their ability to participate successfully in the program. So people that were older or hadn't had much experience in computers or mobile phones or anything didn't really have a problem, which was fantastic. Some of the feedback we got from participants was great. I enjoyed the program immensely. There were immense applications, obviously, for rural and remote areas. Didn't have to go out. One person said that it was better than sleeping tablets, which I thought fantastic. I'd made them, they're sleeping better. And I looked at it again and went, oh, did I just put them to sleep? Anyway, just back to Ray very briefly.
Sorry, thank you. No, the thing wasn't ideal, that's for sure, but it was pretty good. We just did find some places that need to have some work. As we were talking earlier about aphasia, we need to make sure that the interfaces on the client side are actually more set for things like bigger buttons, larger text, those kind of things, different types of inputs that may not have in the actual programs themselves. We had to make sure that we take a look at things like the connection side of things, because we did have pretty much so-so audio quality. But yes, I was on AEST DL and that. On NBN. And I think that with some of those problems we were having with that and with the video, we need to make sure that we've got some diagnostic stuff out there, or at least some manual that people can use before they call the 1-300 number, to see if they can solve things on their own side. Oh, I also would have liked to have my sessions extended. It was for my sake and not for the studies. As we just said, maybe some more time would have actually allowed me to get my heart rate going up a little bit more, and see which more of a came. So,
Thank you, Ray. I'd like to acknowledge my team and also some of the funding that was provided to run this study and the in-kind support we received. Where to from here for us? We have another program that will be up and running in the next couple of months, and that'll be spoken about a little bit more in detail in the next session. But in the meantime, if there are people out there that you know of that have had a stroke that might like to be involved in research, our stroke research register is always open. We're always looking for more people to sign up. Come and see us afterwards, and we'll let you know how you can do that. Thank you.
And whilst you're walking away, Lynn from Malaysia would like to say hello, and Dr. Praj is watching as well, Sue Bowden and Barbara Wolfenden are saying hello, and there's other people there as well. Sorry if I haven't mentioned you all, but they specifically wanted to thank you for your presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ray. Thanks for sharing that. And I think the other thing it highlights is that when you're randomised in a clinical trial as a consumer and you're a participant, you have to follow the dose that you've been given. So it was quite clear that Ray might have liked to have been in a different group and had a bit more, but that wasn't what he was randomised to. So you just need to keep that in mind. You've got to stick to that protocol. It kind of mucks up the research if everyone changes what they're given. But anyhow, it's just by the by. But Kylie English, my co-host, co-convener, is talking about her project on exercise and dietary support using telehealth next.
Next on.
And Meredith is watching from Sydney as well.
Excellent, excellent. So I have a virtual co-presenter who's watching this, Meredith Burke, who's a consumer research partner in this project. And you're going to hear from Meredith in a moment on video. So it's very...
You'll get there.
So we swapped around the original order of the presentation so that you could hear about the EXTO study first that Margie's just finished, and will be very, very soon to be Dr. Margie as she gets her PhD in. And we had a lot of learnings from Margie's study that we're now ramping up into a much bigger trial that will include exercise as well as dietary intervention. So I'm doing the strange thing and starting with the acknowledgements to say there's a huge team behind this work that's been in development for a couple of years now. Our ultimate goal is to get this rolled out in a national trial. But the 4 people you need to know particularly is Meredith, who you're going to hear from in a moment on video, the 2 young PhD candidates that are really going to be driving this, Emily Raymond, who isn't here today, but who will be at the stroke conference the next 2 days, so seek her out, and Carly Zachariah, who's a dietitian PhD candidate, has just come on board, and Margie will be trial managing this trial as well. So they're going to be the real faces of the trial. So hopefully this is going to now work. To click you, I outsourced my presentation, and you're going to hear from Meredith.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. My name is Meredith Burke. And just so you can put a name to the face, part of my stroke story was featured on the ABC Compass program a couple of weeks ago. I was the lady in the hat, and I was in the shower, and I was swimming. So I've been working on the Enable trial with the team for most of this year, and it's been really great working with all the members of the team, and it's been a learning curve, both sides, but it's been a really positive experience. But I'll get to that a little later. So when I was asked to do this, or be an associate investigator on this, I jumped at the chance because exercise and diet are 2 of my passions in life. And with stroke survivors, just like me, it's really important. And I felt a real obligation to help my fellow stroke survivors in this regard. So when we talk about why is it important that we do a trial like this with exercise and diet, firstly, I prefer to use, instead of the term exercise, so many people have issues with exercise that they've built up over the years, and especially when we talk about stroke survivors, I like to use the term moving our bodies, because when we have a stroke, we lose the joy of being able to move our bodies. And so for us to do a trial on this, yes, the researchers call it exercise, but for us it's really about moving our bodies. And moving our bodies, it gets our heart rate up. So it's good for our heart, but it's also good for us because we learn to be able to move our body in a way that potentially we haven't thought of or been able to after our stroke. And to have a professional tailor something to us in the comfort of our own home, I think is a really great thing. And a lot of blow-on effects that potentially researchers haven't thought about. But of course, they may be able to feel better about themselves. They might be able to get more motivation in life. And there's a great thing about moving our bodies and blood flow to our brain that can make us feel a hell of a lot better. So these are all great things and good for our health at the same time. Now, in terms of diet, again, it's one of those words that people have built up over years, issues about. So I prefer to say eating what our body needs. Now, we all need help in learning about how to eat for what our body needs. And after stroke, of course, there's research that what we eat potentially could cause a second stroke. And we don't. No one wants a second stroke. So that if we can learn about moving our bodies and what to put in them, that will help us, our health, and our risk of stroke decreasing or second stroke, then that's a fabulous thing. Now, of course, this trial is using telehealth, and I think that's really important because it allows for us to be at home in the comfort and privacy of our own home, that experts come to us via our tablet or smartphone or computer, and that lets us be more in control of our lives, I believe. We don't have to rely, of course, on getting someone to transport us anywhere. And we also don't have to worry about a lot of energy getting ready to go out. Of course, a lot of stroke survivors can't drive after stroke. So having technology and experts come to us, I think is a great system. Now, getting back to working with the team, Carly and Emily in particular, it's been really great. And I've been able to, there's so much about stroke that researchers don't know about or understand because they've never been in our position.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm able to fill in some interesting and little bits and pieces that are really important to us so that they can make the trial and the process of designing the trial much more.
Meredith was just finishing off by saying that the information that she's been able to share with us from researchers about the lived experience of stroke and making us think about outside the box of what we were originally hoping to get out of the research has been very, very valuable. I'm not really sure where the interference came from. So thank you, Meredith. I know I was listening online in Sydney at another conference, but she prepared that video for us earlier.
Post that on Facebook.
And maybe we'll post that on Facebook. Yeah.
I don't know, because it's not Good, it's not going on now.
Okay. So the vision for this trial is to eventually have everyone who has had a stroke or a TIA to be able to get an exercise and diet program that's tailored for them, that suits their needs and abilities, and is accessible no matter if you live on a sheep station outside of Alice Springs or in metropolitan Sydney, that helps them stay healthy and helps them to live their best life going forward. So what we have done is tried to work very carefully to design a program that we hope has the best chance of success, and that's where America's been very involved in our co-production and co-design works, with a whole range of workshops both in Newcastle and in Melbourne, where we're going to be running this second arm. We've developed up an exercise program that we are now looking to, for the materials that we're giving to people participating in the trial, we're going to rebrand, call it something more meaningful, and probably not call it the exercise program, call it Moving Well. And similarly with eating, the diet program talk about eating well. Carly has spent a lot of time already in her honours degree putting together an Australian version of the Mediterranean diet, which we know has the best evidence for reducing risk factors for stroke. And we're going to do some more workshops around that to make sure we've got that to the best capacity, the best model to be able to help people after stroke to go with that diet. So our next step is to try and test if we can deliver this intervention. So we're piloting this in a research trial with the aim to then scale it up to a much larger trial. What we've done here, and Trevor was talking in the earlier part of the session today around the difficulty with comparing telehealth to usual care, and this is different. Telehealth is a platform that we're delivering services by. We're not comparing it to usual care. We don't have established usual care services for everybody in this space. But the entire trial, including the interventions and all the assessments, will all be telehealth based. So you can live anywhere and be part of this study. Oh, this is the old slides. Margie picture is up there and Carly picture should be up there. At least they're here in
the version.
Got to have that happen. So this is the very brief overview of what the trial will be about. So people after stroke who are able to walk at these short distances will be eligible. That is a broad criteria, and then it'll be flip of a coin whether you're allocated to receive advice and a couple of telehealth advice sessions, whether you get the supervised exercise sessions, which will be very much based on what we did in the EXTO study and what we know works. Dietary counselling with primarily Carly providing intervention, or a group where you get both of those, where we think you're actually going to get more than double benefit from having both exercise and diet optimised. Then we have to test if it works, of course, and we've got a range of measures around stroke risk factors, which from a medical trial perspective are some of the things we need to show is going to be effective. Blood pressure being the primary, and if we eventually get enough money, we'll look at some blood markers as well, measures of physical activity. But more importantly, I think we're working and making sure with Meredith and with Ray that we're consulting with as well as many others, that we're trying to capture the measures that are most meaningful to people who are participating in it as well. Because whether or not your blood pressure reduces by 2 or 3 millimetres of mercury, you probably are happy about that because we've told you enough that that's going to really reduce your risk of stroke and other things, but you're going to get more benefit and the value out of how it's made you feel. So we want to make sure we're capturing those data as well. Ultimately, we want to make this sort of a service business as usual in the healthcare. So that will be the next step, and this is very much embedded in this project as our implementation and process evaluation specialist as well. So finally, if you're interested, either from stroke survivors who aren't already on the register interested in signing up, or people from different health services who aren't linked up with the register and want to be involved in the trial, please come and chat to us. We have just put our ethics application in. We're hoping to get started on this trial by mid-September, as in recruiting the first few patients. We also do have another opportunity for someone else to come on board and make it a vehicle for their PhD. So I'm just putting that out to the universe as well.
Great, thanks, Carly. I'm in an exciting project, and we're just running out of time. It's just evaporating. I hope everyone's as riveted to all this information as I have been. It's been fantastic. So next we have our neuropsychologist team, Dana Wong and Renee Stolwick, who are going to speak about memory rehabilitation. So we haven't covered that yet, so that's exciting that we're finishing off with that. And then we'll head into a shortened version of our panel when we get to it.
You've got a clicker. And if anyone is struggling because it's the afternoon, not because it's boring, and your brains feel a bit tired, feel free to stand up, stretch your legs, sit down. You don't have to stay in your seat.
Yes, do that. It's interesting, we're talking about memory at the very end of the day, we're all tired and our attention's waning, but hopefully we'll finish off with a bang. So I'm Dana, I'm a neuropsychologist and also a lecturer and researcher at La Trobe University in Melbourne. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about some work that we've been doing over the last few years on telehealth memory rehabilitation. And this work, I really want to particularly acknowledge David Lawson. He's the one on the computer there in the photo. He has led this work as part of his doctoral research, and he's actually a stroke survivor himself, and I think it's a real strength of this work that it's been led from within the stroke community.
He's watching on Facebook. Hi, Dave.
Oh, hi, David. Memory difficulties affect more than half of stroke survivors, so the majority of people after stroke are struggling with this, and we know it's associated with a range of negative outcomes, including higher risk of depression and anxiety, as well as reduced independence, quality of life, and capacity to return to work. And we know from studies both in Australia and overseas that when we ask stroke survivors about their unmet needs after stroke, that memory difficulties top the list usually. So this is a real area, a real gap in our rehabilitation services that we really need to fill. And we do have some accumulating evidence about what works to help everyday memory function after stroke. So we have been running a memory skills group program face-to-face over the last few years. That includes 3 main elements. So we talk about how memory works. We also train the use of various memory strategies. These include internal or mental strategies, things you're doing mentally to help yourself remember things, as well as training the use of external memory aids. And then we also incorporate some different lifestyle improvements. So we've just heard about how diet and exercise is important for a range of health benefits, and these benefits include memory function. And so we ran a trial of this program, and we found that it was effective in helping stroke survivors improve the areas of memory that were important to them that caused problems in their everyday life. And we found it was more effective than a computerised cognitive training program. So knowing that, we want to be able to offer this program to as many people as possible, but there are lots of barriers that get in the way. So if you don't live in a metropolitan region or in a health service region that offers these memory groups, or if there's barriers related to cost or getting to a program or getting the transport there, then it's much harder to access. And so we were really interested in finding out whether this program could be offered through telehealth. So what we did is we ran a study where we compared delivering this program in a group session face-to-face with individually face-to-face and then individually via telehealth, so using video conferencing as we've been using throughout today. And we did this with 46 community dwelling stroke survivors. So in terms of how we knew that this was working, what we did is we asked people to tell us about their main goals that were related to memory. And so these were things like being better at remembering names of their friends and family and people that they'd just met, as well as remembering things like conversations, remembering where you put your belongings. All these things are fairly common issues amongst the stroke community. We also asked people to tell us how often memory lapses were happening in their everyday lives, and also to tell us how often they were using particular memory strategies to help support their memory. So what we found was that all of our groups who did these memory skills programs face-to-face or via telehealth showed improvement, but in fact it was our telehealth group that showed the most significant improvement. So that was really interesting to see, and we found that many of our participants who did the program through telehealth, this was actually the first time they had any access to not just memory rehabilitation, but any rehabilitation. So this was definitely meeting a need for them. And so all of our telehealth participants achieved at least one of their memory-specific goals. So that was really great to see. We also found that our participants were using more strategies, and all our groups were also showing reductions in the frequency of everyday memory lapses.
But sometimes this improvement wasn't consistently maintained over time, as I'll mention it again in a moment. So just wanted to highlight that this study is in press in the Journal of International Neuropsychological Society, so you can read about it more there. And if you have trouble accessing journals or would like a summary of the study, I'm happy to provide that. So just to wrap that up, so I think these telehealth methods do really show promise as a mode of delivery for effective memory rehabilitation, and that this can improve access to really rehabilitation in the stroke community. And in fact, since this study finished, I've actually trained another student who wasn't involved in the study to run the program, and they did that successfully through our university psychology clinic for a person in Queensland, and she did really well and had great outcomes. So I feel pretty optimistic that this program is quite easy to roll out and should be readily accessible, hopefully in the future. One other thing that I think we need to think about is the role of booster sessions. So this is a 6-week program with 6 sessions, but some of those changes that you learn in the program might be difficult to maintain over time, as we saw in some of our results. So we're currently about to start a study looking at how we could use booster sessions, also delivered via telehealth, and also text messages to help maintain use of the strategies and sustain those gains for longer. Okay, I just want to acknowledge the huge and great team that have contributed to that work. And now I'm going to hand over to Renee to talk a bit more about how we can implement these telehealth memory rehab methods in practice.
Thank you. Yeah, so Dana's obviously talked about the importance of memory and how important it is in terms of long-term function. We also know that educating and intervening with memory problems early also leads to even better outcomes. So detecting these problems early, intervening early is really important. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, is how we can actually provide memory rehabilitation, even when people are in the inpatient setting. And this is to rural and remote people, because we know that access to psychology, neuropsychology, and rural and regional areas is limited. So in an order back in 2013, apologies for the people who saw this morning, but only 4% of stroke survivors with cognitive issues had access to psychology in rural regions. And that was really underpinning our initiative to try and get access to psychology early on after stroke. And that's what a lot of our work has been doing. We've developed methods to provide cognitive assessments, mood assessments, in addition to interventions for those issues, to patients in these rural hospitals using telehealth. And currently we're at 4 hospitals: Echuca, Albury-Wodonga, Wangaratta, and Latrobe Regional Health. So that's happening at the moment. And so what do we do, or what do clinical neuropsychologists do? Well, we have expertise in those brain-behaviour relationships. So we help with detecting and understanding those cognitive changes, whether it's memory or problem solving or attention or concentration. We help with understanding them, understanding their severity, and how that relates maybe to some mood issues as well. And we also provide a range of interventions to help ameliorate those issues. And I thought what I'd do just for a couple of minutes is just run you through a case, just to kind of, I guess, illustrate and give you a bit of a flavour of how we might be kind of helpful in that inpatient setting. So I'll just talk through Michael, who was a 77-year-old retired motor mechanic, and he suffered a left frontal subarachnoid hemorrhage while on holiday. And he was initially sent to Melbourne for surgery and an acute kind of care, but then sent back to his rural hospital for ongoing rehabilitation. And he had a number of impairments. He had some weakness in his right leg, causing some unsteadiness. But the team were really struggling to manage it, because despite these issues, he was trying to walk around independently, and despite being quite unsafe. And he was requiring a lot of assistance to complete some basic tasks, but he was not really engaging in therapy particularly well. And as time went on, his behaviour started to become a lot more agitated, and they were struggling to manage him. He really wanted to go home, and whenever his wife was ill, he would really kept on talking about wanting to go home and asking for the car keys so he could drive home. He was trying to leave the ward, and I was getting engaged. So the nursing staff and Michael's wife were struggling to really understand his behaviour and manage it. And unfortunately, with the agitation, they were managing that with sedation. So we're getting into this problem of a bit of a downward spiral. That he was becoming quite agitated. They were managing that with sedation, which was causing some confusion, which increased agitation, and things weren't looking great. He was often quite drowsy, and at that point, I think the idea of the team was that maybe discharge destination to high-level care was probably the most likely pathway for him. So how did neuropsychology contribute in this case? Well, we did quite a lot of assessment, but in 2 minutes I won't be able to go through it. But one of the key things we found about Michael was that he was actually completely disorientated to where he was, and he was confabulating, which means that he was unintentionally kind of making up memories, not on purpose. And he actually believed he was on a community farm, I think, near Bendigo, so he didn't even realise he was in hospital. And he wasn't aware at all of what had happened to him or kind of his impairments. So it reduced self-awareness as well. Assessment kind of identified that even basic things like asking him to remember 2 or 3 words over a short period of time, he wasn't able to do. So he was pretty much amnesic, we would say, very severe memory problems. So with that information, you can kind of understand why he might be getting agitated. So whenever he would get off the bed to go for a walk, because he didn't realise he'd walk, 3 people would immediately rush into his room. And if you're in your own home in the community of Bendigo, imagine 3 strangers coming into your room and trying to pin you down and prevent you from going home. He was really confused. So our interventions and me working with the rest of the therapy team was actually to change our behaviour and set up an environment that we could kind of, provide the best environment for Michael. So we started up a orientation what's happened to him, and that helped really provide context for his behaviour. We were modelling calm behaviour, so whenever he wanted to get out of his bed, instead of 3 people rushing into his room, 1 person would just calmly walk into his room and guide him about what was going on. And, he was actually quite easy to redirect and reorientate once that orientation happened. So we were able to calm his behaviour down without using sedatives. And what we started, and we also used a number of techniques such as creating a consistent daily routine, using errorless learning techniques, which I won't be able to talk about. But we're able to change, by changing our behaviour and setting up the environment, we got away from this kind of downward spiral to more of an upward spiral of really reducing his agitation, getting him reorientated, which meant he was more calm, he was more alert, and more engaged in therapy. And that was the real turning point for Michael, in fact, that because he was able to engage, he was more alert, he actually started making quite good gains. And cutting a long story short, he ended up actually being able to go home with supports. So it's an example of how we were able to, by addressing the cognitive issues in a really clear and consistent way, we're able to really change the direction early on. Yeah, I think that's it from me actually, because I don't want to take up too much time. I guess the take-home message is because we're able to do this over telehealth, really opening up opportunities to provide these types of interventions to these patients in rural areas who normally wouldn't get access to it. We're able to demonstrate that teleneuropsychology is feasible and effective, and it's a really great way of supporting existing teams in rural areas, reducing their burden, and building up their skills to manage a whole range of different people with cognitive and depression. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Thank you both. We're going to set up for the panel now. We're running a little bit behind time. While we're doing this, was there any questions or comments for Dana or Renee? Michael?
Yeah, thank you for fantastic presentations during this afternoon, and I feel really encouraged about opportunities in this space. But referring back to what I said about increasing cost in healthcare care in general, and I would ask you, Rohan, and ask you, the recent speakers, how do you view additional opportunities to the telemedicine platform? Is that to fill a void, to increase the service offering, or is it to replace existing service offering, or a combination? And my question is, will this increase the financial burden on one individual and or the society as an add-on to already existing service, or what do you say?
Thanks for that question. I think Renee and I are both chomping to answer it. The first thing, rehabilitation, there isn't any existing service that the telehealth would be replacing. It's actually providing a service where there was none before. And even actually, for quite a few of the participants of our telehealth study were actually living in metropolitan regions, but had a lot of trouble coming to a clinic if they were working. It was hard to access in working hours, and also the fatigue associated with somewhere, so preparing for an appointment and getting transport there, catching multiple pieces of public transport, whatever it is, that all added to fatigue. By the time they get to the appointment, they're really tired. So I think I don't imagine that this would fully replace face-to-face services, but could certainly supplement and add to what's there and help address a lot of the barriers to accessing these services that currently exist.
Yeah, I just only, I'll add to that. I think particularly with the work we do, in some ways we detect changes that weren't previously seen. So in some ways that seems we're creating need, and I guess what's important, I think we learned about this morning, is being able to actually quantify how we make those improvements. And right from improving quality of life to reducing caregiver burden. I think when you're addressing those cognitive and mood issues, it's that kind of stuff you're targeting. And so even though I think putting money in early on, you can get these long-term kind of improvements and
Reduce costs that way.
reduce costs. And well, I think we need to demonstrate that.
It's been such a great day. We are running a little bit behind, so we're hoping we can hold you till at least 4:15. Not sure if anyone has to run off before then. We've got a hand up. Does that mean you've got to run away? Yes. Or you can stay till 4:15.
No.
Right. Thank you. So I'll need Rohan Grimley. Rohan Grimley is the clinical lead for stroke in Queensland. He's going to join us on the panel. He's a geriatrician. And we've got various other panel members, including myself and Coralie. No? We haven't got the whole list. I'm handing over to Jill.
Thank you.
With other panel members,
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes, Jennifer Rutherford. Jenny Rutherford is a registered nurse and also the telehealth manager for Hunter New England Health. So we're very pleased to have her experience on board. We've got Stephen Ward and his wife Tracey Ward. So Stephen is a stroke survivor, a civil engineer, and also a councillor for Muswellbrook City Council. And Tracey is sustainability officer at Muswellbrook City Council as well. And then Raymond Gray, there you are. I don't know how I missed you right there in front of me. You already know who Raymond is. So he's going to join the other end of our panel, and I'll just pull a desk over so there's space. Actually, come over here. I'm going to ask you a question, but also just check that you're all visible on the live stream, and I'll ask my question from over here and then fiddle with cameras. Yeah, just like slipping through. All right, so we have Facebook and YouTube happening at the moment, which is great. Excellent. The only thing is we've just locked the door. So if, yeah, great. Okay. So We've heard about lots of different offerings in the telehealth space. Maybe I'll move right over to here. In terms of stroke rehabilitation today, but I want to know, and we might just take a couple of people's perspectives on this one, what needs to happen next so that these sorts of things are available here now and everywhere now? You know, there's a couple of research studies that show this is great, this should be happening. Dominique, could we ask you actually first, in your opinion, like what actually needs to happen so that the proven things are offered now?
Well, first we've got to continue to show where the gaps are and people aren't getting these services, and then work with each of the funders of those services to recognise the evidence that is available through the modality of telehealth, which is what we've talked today, as an alternate way of offering services to people that are missing out, so we can reduce equity of access. So I think, you know, we're doing quite well at getting traction in the acute stroke space, but in terms of offering different interdisciplinary support for stroke rehabilitation and recovery, that just seems to be missing. So it's about getting a critical mass like we have today to think about what our recommendations might be and then to whom we might put those forward, but also having the knowledge of where the gaps are through the national order and things like that can help illustrate that people aren't getting what they need. So I might also hand over to Rohan, who's in a position of influence in Queensland.
Yeah, right. Yeah, look, I agree. I think one thing you need to know the gaps. The health economic data that Dom pointed out is essential for this, to make the arguments for the funders to try and do something, but also to make the arguments for the people that organise services so that we can look at whether redesigning existing face-to-face services so they can be provided by telehealth is also an essential one that we need to do, because as we've heard, telehealth can actually be superior, not only more convenient and potentially cheaper, but superior in terms of the outcomes. So it's very important to get that. To do that, we also need to keep getting the data about how much it is. So whilst there's fairly solid data out there, it's still very early and in pockets. And if we can do something on a wider basis, that would be useful. So one, get the gaps. Two, demonstrate that it's economically feasible, perhaps better. And three, sort of underpinning is essential so that we can actually make those arguments stronger and stronger. Whilst we're doing it, doing the ongoing research at least gives access to the people who are involved in the research programs, which, as we found, is valuable in its own right.
So maybe Jennifer, if you'd like to comment, because you're providing services within mainstream now, and you found a way of getting it funded and supported. What can the rest of us learn from you?
So I guess it is exactly that, getting the research that's being done back to the units that are actually either providing this care now or can look to changing the practice that they're providing. So to look to do things in a different way. And the bottom line is we need to improve outcomes for our patients. We need to keep patients out of hospital. And wherever there is research that is showing that we can keep people well and in their homes, and in the case of your research, stop people having second strokes. I mean, that really, and it is back to the health economics of having that data to show the units that this is worth doing. And certainly the districts are, certainly Hunter New England and Queensland and South Australia have acknowledged that telehealth has a role to play in the way that we provide care in the future. So I think it's really perhaps definitely once the information is out there, bringing it to the districts and the units to help translate.
Just comment that one point made today is it's not always about the economic dollar value. I think Renee pointed that out with Echuca. It was also about outcomes for their patient, and quality of service were just as equally valued as how much it would cost to run it.
Not to take over too much time, I think the other thing is for the clinicians, it's just do it.
Yes.
So see, it's all there. The infrastructure is there amongst all these state things. It's just do it. And then, but make sure you sort of monitor what you're doing. I've been doing a TIA service to a rural hospital for quite a few years now. And now I'm trying to work out, I haven't kept a record of everybody I saw, and I've got to dig back and do it. So you've actually got to keep that going so that you can. And but the message to the consumers and the patients is, ask or demand for it too, because that will drive it. So,
So we live in Denman, which is an hour and a half from here. And when Stephen had his stroke, big dramas, you know, we took up from hospital, it took too long, all of them. It took 5 hours for Stephen to get to a stroke unit because of lots of things. But after he got out of hospital, only one doctor said to us, "You don't need to drive an hour and a half to see me." And he organised a Skype with us. The other day we had that Stephen's kidney specialist, Dr. Gillian, who he's seen for years, and he's looked at Stephen and he said, "I don't need you." And he realised that someone had to drive Stephen now. We couldn't just drive. Stephen couldn't drive himself to appointments anymore. He needs someone to take him. And the other day we were out seeing the infection control specialist at John Hunter, Dr. Mark Lowenthal, and he looked at us both and he said to me, "Do you want telehealth for your next session?" And I was like, yes, please. So it's starting to happen. We just need everyone, and I guess my thing is to stroke survivors and carers out there, ask, can this be done by telehealth? And that way maybe we won't all need to be driving all the time. Stephen requires his carers to take him if I'm not there. Yeah, and can we use the internet for faraway things? Yeah, and I think that's one of his species. So at the moment we've got a speech in Muswellbrook, which is a 25-minute drive. That's not too bad. But to start with, when we got home to Muswellbrook from John Hunter Hospital and Rehab, there was a 6-month wait for community health speech, and Stephen needed it now, and no one really offered it, and it could have been done by telehealth. Like when I look at it now, I'm like, why couldn't you have done that over the internet? It's so doable. But instead we were paying big dollars, because it was before NDIS came in, to see a speechy once a week for an hour, which wasn't enough, because Stephen needed way more than that. And now they're willing to Skype us even from Muswellbrook. To me, it just doesn't, I don't know why we didn't hurry up with it.
And look, that's a story that we hear all the time, and we really, the technology's there, it's been there for quite some time, so the clinicians that work within our services, really there is no reason for them to be asking their patients to travel anymore, and that is part of our role in getting that word across to them, making things easier on their end, but we really just cannot be continuing to ask our patients to travel.
But we need to remind them.
Well, it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately, that is, patient focus, and patients do have a large role to play in helping us forward. As a district, absolutely, we should be providing this without needing that, but that certainly does help.
So call to action, I had to campaign to get my telehealth appointments too, and I work in the health system. So I understand that it's not easy always, but it is getting traction, and the research that's being published absolutely helps, and forums like this help. Which leads us on to the next thing though, because if we should just already be doing this, now remember this is just a mode of communication. It doesn't mean that we're doing the telehealth where, providing speech pathology via telehealth. If it should already, what still needs researching? And I wonder for all of you, what are the next things that we should actually be putting research dollars towards and working out? I was having a conversation with Ray about this earlier. So thinking priority areas, what's the next thing to research? Do you want to comment to start with?
I think one of the things we've got is we have to consider what's actually on the home side of all this. And yes, we're talking about having someone that's there to supervise us in the case of things like physio and OTs and such. But we have to make sure that whoever's on the other side is actually informed enough and can deal with what we need to do. You can imagine with us talking to a psychologist, the person all of a sudden becomes very irate about it, or what they're seeing and hearing on the telehealth and such. They need to be able to deal with it. So we need to make sure that the person who's supporting the person on the other side is actually given at least some instruction. In the case of rehab, maybe physio, maybe it's just when to look at the person, make sure they're not going to fall or something, but it can get actually a little bit better than that. We've got to talk about making sure that even if it's at the home, still going to need someone that's going to be able to support them on that.
I was going to ask, as a clinician, and trying to link this back into, well, yes, we could just be doing it and already providing more educational training, but what, as a clinician, what needs to be researched to make sure you can say this model is going to provide the right sort of far-sight support?
I think we have a big need for a few things, and sort of setting is one of them. So is this better than our traditional form? And so that's in terms of access, but also clinical outcomes. So what we need are some big studies that provide evidence of whether we have better clinical outcomes for people who have home-based rehabilitation with telehealth across all of the disciplines, and particularly in a multidisciplinary form. Then I think the other setting issue is, can we use it within a hospital setting also to provide issues so people can actually be closer to home or to regional areas. And in Queensland, where I'm from, it's so dispersed. We have a real dearth of expertise. So we know that specialist rehabilitation actually makes a difference, and specialist services do. But if you live in a country area, you can only have a generalist service where the allied health professionals have to be able to deal with everything from paediatrics to musculoskeletal to neurological to everything. And they need some support their own right. So we have those. I think there's probably more settings than that, but there's the home-based and the centre-based, and can it work? I think that then gives us one of the big things we're probably ready to start to look towards is a very big implementation research project where you do some of these things, particularly the centre-based things, where you implement and do the research about the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness, the impact on the patients and the staff, by implementing and then embedding it in. And like Dom said, with their telestroke, their acute telestroke, they did the research, they implemented it, and then it became so embedded that the system was forced to continue it because it was so valuable. And so that, in a rehabilitation setting, I think we're ready almost to do that within health systems. I think we probably need a little more primary data in home-based stuff before we're ready to do the widespread implementation stuff. Dom's probably got better ideas.
No, I haven't got better ideas, I've just got complementary things. I think one of the other issues that hasn't been talked about is workforce capacity. So, if you're taking your clinical staff to provide telehealth services, what's happening for the people coming for outpatient assessments or within the hospital or whatever? So, in thinking about that, you have to think about, well, how do we provide that service to a larger number of people, and does it not take away from some of the local activity that you also have to provide? And it's not about the same FTE or full-time equivalents providing more work in less time. So it is getting that formula right.
And do the local staff, like in Denman, we've got a tiny little NPS, and in Muswellbrook, we've got a small hospital. Those staff do not have the clinical experience that staff at John Hunter or Maitland would have. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be asking them to be doing things that they're not really, where's their support, I guess is my question.
Well, and I guess that's where telehealth can really help to upskill people in those smaller sites. So they can, you can have that patient in the small site with their local treating staff, health professionals, linking through to the specialist services and being involved in those appointments that you would traditionally travel for, so then the local health professionals miss out on all that opportunity for consult are not to be dismissed, although we're saving the patient travelling. But it is including that local caring team that actually improve the outcomes by continuing to be involved. So
And that upskills all of them as well.
absolutely, and staff are very willing to be upskilled and want to be upskilled. You know, they're caring for their patients and to be kept in the loop. Communication amongst self is often not the best, and you know, people wait for letters, people wait for communication, often it doesn't come. And I'll get to the people that actually really need it. So I really think that's where we need to move forward, as well from the inpatient setting as well as the outpatient setting. So improving, you know, doing handovers, video handovers when someone's had an inpatient illness or situation when they're being handed back to staff in smaller facilities perhaps don't have the expertise to improve that communication. So there is lots that can be done there.
Oh, what a utopia. Like, as a community physiotherapist, after having worked in inpatient rehab, to have had Michael Pollack on a video handing over the patient to me would have been amazing. Otherwise, you're wasting the patient's time for the first 2 weeks, doing the assessments over again. So it's Dr. Renee Stowick for people who are listening online, neuropsychologist.
I just very quickly want to just take up that point about capacity building in those rural areas. That's I think it needs to be done in a very cost-sensitive way as well. I've seen it go wrong in some ways as well, where the rural teams see this person from Metro tell them what to do, and I think it's almost an area for research. Is how do we do that? How do we upskill in a supportive way without making them feel kind of devalued or
Sure. I'm going to hand back to the panel to answer the question, and then we might have 1, 2, 3 questions, and that will have to be the end of our time.
I think it's about coordination, Renee. So you recognised early with the Chuka hospital, the town, that education and training, skill building for this type of service delivery model has to happen first. And then you roll it out in a way that everyone trusts and believes in the system and has had some involvement in how it's going to be locally set up and delivered.
I think that points to another area for research and development, which is this is not an all or nothing thing, and a combination of face-to-face and tele is often quite useful. And so my personal experience with the little rural places, although I do everything by tele, when I go up there occasionally, they sort of feel left out. And there's something about relationship building, which is important, and including, so what is the best balance, and what do people, both the patients and the staff at both ends, find the best in terms of that combination between face-to-face and tele presence. Now, maybe the future generations are happy with just tele things, but at the moment, we all value a face-to-face consultation, and we need to sort of just ensure that we reinsert that back into this whole thing.
So Margaret, who is a member of our stroke community.
I was asked to ask a question about aphasia. If you've got extra money and you're going to do some research, I'd like you to put it into aphasia. I have a daughter, I'm emotional. I have a daughter who had a stroke 2 years ago, and it's terrible. But it's not just terrible for her, it's when you take her to her doctor or a nurse or someone, the reaction is to tell me to shut up. If she's in pain, she cannot communicate. She's told, I have and the male nurse who attended to her gave her 2 Panadol. She was screaming and telling me she was in pain. And I was trying to tell him what the situation was. And I said, she suffers with aphasia. When she's in pain, she cannot tell you. And I was trying to explain that she had other, and he just said to me, Mum, you be quiet, let her talk. I said, I would if she would. But we never revise. We never go back, we never look, and we never relearn afterwards. We just take it for granted that we're A or B or C, we've got the knowledge that we had when we started. But everything progresses. And I think if you took the time, particularly within this group or other people that have had aphasia, the way that they're rejected at times is embarrassing. Very, really embarrassing. And I think it's something you all need to look at, because what you're doing is wonderful. But look lower into the people that are suffering with it, and they'll tell you things that you won't believe. And I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your presentation.
And first, I'm so sorry that
And we're,
It hurts.
yes, yeah, it does.
And it's not just the patient that hurts, it's the carers. The carers of the family. You put so much time into them and you grieve for their loss. My daughter's 46 and she's in a cocoon and you grieve for that. And for people to say, I don't know what's the matter with her. She's beautiful, she smiles, but people don't understand what aphasia is. And I must admit, I was one of them. Even though I've had a mum that I've had in a wheelchair for 17 years, I've never been affected with that. I did have a taste of aphasia because I myself had experienced death twice in 10 days. And after that, when I came back, there was a lot of things I couldn't remember, there was a lot of things I couldn't say. But I had a doctor who was good enough to say, take your time. And I learned ways around it. But with Monique, it's so hard. And with so many other people, it's hard. And you need to reinforce. That's it. That's overlooked. And the same with NDIS. NDIS don't fund it. They really don't want to fund speech therapy. So that's something to take on board. Thank you.
Stephen would like to say something now. Margaret's
Sure.
got more
Sorry, yeah, and thank you for your comments. What we'll do is we'll pass over to Stephen for his comments, and then Dave, and I'm not quite sure of your name, we'll wrap up the live stream because we need to stop, but then invite you to come and talk to the panelists anyway.
Exercise, good. Running, good. Now, sight, no. Exercise, no. Running, no.
Chamberlain?
Exercising, good. Gym, exercise, correct?
What do you forget?
No.
Playing cricket.
Yeah.
You want to go back to playing cricket?
I think, are you trying to say you did a lot of things before your stroke, like playing cricket, and you're an engineer, you did poison at maths. Stephen is a very intelligent individual, and he used to be quite fit and used to orient here. And when he goes to hospital and someone talks to him like he is an idiot, and we had the opportunity to educate a nurse at Rutherford District Hospital when she told me to tell my husband to stop yelling at her when they had got his medications wrong. And he got quite upset, and she told me, I do not work to be abused. And I said to her, he has a brain injury, he has aphasia. And I left them an education brochure on aphasia, and then the following week, one of Stephen's support workers also is a TAFE educator. She does adult nursing education, and she invited us to talk to her nursing class about communication disorders. So that's the way we're going to deal with people being ignorant about.
And we're committed to making this better. I'm going to hand back over to Dominique to wrap up the day. Thank you so much for being involved. If it's okay, sure.
I just had a quick comment. There's been some mention about the technology and the end user. There's been mentioned Skype and FaceTime and so forth. I think what needs to be considered is the end user who's a bit of a technophobe. And some thought needs to be put into making this as simple as possible. It extends to the NDIS, because if you were looking at, I think probably an iPad or something would be the best way to do this. Then if there's one program that is suitable, because you could have people with aphasia who want to communicate with the person they're dealing with, they don't have a carer with them, how else are they going to be able to communicate? They might be able to type something in. You need to consider that particular program. And maybe some research needs to be put into that, because if you're offering all these different strategies, I think it becomes confusing. And if you focus on one particular strategy or application, whatever it happens to be, it's easier to get funding with the NDIS to say, well, I want an iPad and I want this program. funded so that I can
Because these studies
do
have
this.
proven that this is the best form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a factor you need to look at as well.
Okay, thank you. And finally, I was just going to, we unfortunately don't have time to elaborate further, but Raymond, for example, is an application specialist, is someone that's been involved professionally as a user experience specialist, and having him involved to share ideas with our research team is fantastic. Dave, you've got the final word. It's not unusual, is it?
I don't know about that. My experience, now you're talking earlier about rural hospitals, it's not just rural hospitals. John Hunter, which has got some of the so-called best brains in stroke, is where I had my stroke. I told them I was having a stroke because I've done enough. Anyway, they left me on a trolley for 10 hours. I had blood pressure in excess of 200. My daughter was going berserk, telling me I was having a stroke. They ignored me. Now the big problem is, and I don't know how you can address this, the big problem is the closed minds of these so-called professionals. They learn something early on and they don't want to hear any more about improving mind. You've got FACE, F-A-S-E or what it is, the acronym. I had none of those symptoms. So they had the stroke team upstairs, 3 hours nurse from the stroke team. They never came down to look at me. They just left me on the trolley. And the stroke team told her that I wasn't having a stroke. I mean, how could they make that judgment without coming and have a look at me? I still get so, I'm in a couple of groups and I hear the same story time and again. Some of them here said here today, they treat you like a retard. And it's unacceptable. That attitude has to change. I'm glad to see the researchers are finally getting the message through. But it's these old buggers that have been there for a long time that don't listen. I'm a fairly educated man. I was a tradesman. I did electronics in the army, so I'm not an idiot. The people in our choir, we've got accountants, we've got all sorts of guys, and they're told by their doctors, go away. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm a professional. And we hear this story time and time and time again. My stroke was 8 years ago, so you think they've moved on. But I'm still hearing it today. You know, it's not changing. Now, Gillian, I've spoken to Gillian about this, and it's quite obvious now that the mindset's changing. They're starting to get the stroke survivors involved in research right at the very start, so they're researching the right things. It's going to take a long time to change, I know that. But how are you people going to change the attitudes of some of the senior men? I just don't know. And it's just going to keep happening. And people are going to die because of it. I was unlucky as I dodged a bullet. I came through. I see people in our choir. I see young girls in wheelchairs. And I never got therapy. A lot of them never did. Meredith, who was on here earlier, she was sent home. You know, it's an ongoing story. And that's where the big problem is. Now, I've spoken to Gillian about what they should have is regular forums around the table. I've noticed there's no doctors here today. It's all researchers, which is what I want. Maybe sorry, I apologise. Maybe there's one or two.
We'll just share the microphone for a second. And everything that's happened to you was not right. I want to, and we're boosting your stories going out internationally now. I want to somewhat not invalidate what you just said because it's very real. And yes, things like this still happen. The research that's happening in Australia is now leading the world. And so these things are objectively happening less often, particularly some of the work that Dominique's been doing in looking at the data. Still, we're not there, and that's why we're all here. We really are moving ahead and using like what's happening in Victoria with the Stroke Telemedicine Network, and then here with the Telestroke Services. Specialist neurologists are having a look at people all over the place, as well as at John Hunter Hospital. So we're moving ahead, and we need your voices.
I know that, but I'll just finish. I've spoken to Gillian about this a fair bit. It seems now that the community is moving that way, but what you researchers have got to do is when you're developing a program Medicam, and you need on a regular basis to sit down with stroke survivors with a heap of professionals around the table, sit down with the survivors who know what it's all about and listen to their stories. We had a meeting a couple of months ago, and there were a couple of doctors there, weren't there, at Wall's End, and they were sat there and they're going, the jaws just drop when they're here, because when you got stroke survivors together, they open up, they tell you the story, and then you start to get insight into what's going on. And until you've got that insight, you can't understand what you need to research. One of the things that affects me and affects Meredith is fatigue. That means investigating was my emergency. Anyway, I've got so much to say, I'll leave it. I'm just getting work done.
I am really pleased that we're covering off a lot of those topics. Fatigue is a major focus and priority area for research. Okay, there you go. The Centre for Research Excellence in Aphasia Therapy, which was presented earlier by colleague Dr. Annie Hill, was presented. So that's taking over from this other CRE, because that gets 5 years of funding. So it's going to be a big focus on improving services and what we know in how to deliver therapy for people with aphasia. And in terms of people who fall through the cracks, which is what you've identified, you go to even a world-class with those hospitals, feed back that data and ensure they have ways in which they can change clinician behaviour so that more people get what they need when they need it at the right time and by the right people. We're not there yet. People do fall through the holes, but we have that infrastructure now within Australia to make things better for people coming after that are going to experience stroke. We can never eliminate stroke from our society. Age is one of the biggest risk factors, but there are things that we know that we can modify. So it's been a terrific day today. Thank you all for your open discussion. I hope we've reassured our consumers that we are doing work that's relevant to you and we are involving you in these processes. And I'd just like to ask Coralie to just close off and thank the people that really helped us make today happen. Thank you.
And please keep the conversations going. So I know people need to go, so we need to wrap up the formalities, but please keep talking. And I wanted to just end by saying a very, very huge thank you to two people who made this day happen, and they are Raymond Gray and Gillian. And I think it's like a potted succulent. So thank you very much, and I'll bring yours over, Raymond. So please keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for coming to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.